We're reading chapter 3 of the Fellowship of the Ring, which is called Three's Company. I'm really enjoying the chapter titles of this book because they're good. A lot of books these days just have chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, etc. But I do think chapter titles are it's such a missed opportunity for like either bad puns or just something thematic that is subtle, but you bring through just that little bit with a little bit more strength. I like it. And we finally meet elves, and they are just we'll get there, but honestly, they're just rude, kind of, or impolite, or just anyway, we'll get there. I wanted to actually go to, before we do anything, this is in the expanded and revised edition of Tolkien's letters. There is a letter number 26. There's this cute line that says, the sequel to The Hobbit, this is on page 45, the sequel to The Hobbit has now progressed as far as the end of the 3rd chapter, which I've just read. But stories tend to get out of hand, and this has taken an unpremeditated turn. Where is it turning? So anyway, I like that. I don't know what unpremeditated turn he is referring to by the end of the 3rd chapter, whether it is the stuff that goes down with the elves or the lore that he's starting to develop in his head regarding the Black Riders, because there's a chance that he probably didn't even know what they were when he started writing about them. This is how it works, right? Mr. Lewis and my youngest boy are reading it in bits as a serial. They approve it enough to say that they think it is better than The Hobbit. This 3rd chapter definitely has more intrigue in it than pretty much everything so far, because there's forward action and Frodo is finally on a road and meeting people, and the Black Riders, they come across the Black Riders twice, and in many ways, this probably also would have made a good 1st chapter. But it's okay. They had to do the nostalgia thing with Bilbo. Frodo being like, oh yeah, I know that I'm leaving somewhere, but I actually have no idea what direction to go. Like, he doesn't even have an inkling of like north, south, east or west. I have never even considered the direction. For what is my quest? Bilbo went to find a treasure there and back again, but I go to lose one and not return, as far as I can see. Very dark statement from Frodo, and also kind of, it is a bit unfair that he's going on this massive adventure and the only thing that he's going to get out of this is the loss of one of Bilbo's most treasured items, which is kind of mean. I guess it does make sense. Frodo wouldn't, I mean, Gandalf said that he has to go cast it in the fires of where it was made. I think that's what he said last chapter. Did he say that? Yeah, he did say that. But yeah, Frodo wouldn't have any idea where that is. Or how far away. But Gandalf's extremely helpful answer, like just super helpful, is when Frodo's like, which way do I go? He's just like, well, towards danger, but not too rashly, nor too straight. It's definitely good life advice for whenever someone is asking you what they think that they should do in a certain position or particular situation. You just say, keep heading towards danger. Don't hurry there. Meander on the way. You're doing great. I'm assuming Gandalf obviously says, he says go to Rivendell. So Frodo seems to know that the path to Rivendell, he knows that much at least, because Bilbo would have told him, or he would have read it. But no, he knows that much. And I think Frodo would have generally known that he was going to be going east and not west, but you never know. But honestly, that is just such a great quote from Gandalf. What course am I to take? Toward danger. Just chill out on the way though. But you are going towards danger. If you continue down the path toward danger, you're probably on the right track, which is unfortunately the truth when you're trying to get to Mordor. I like it how Gandalf says that, it is becoming more and more perilous, and it will grow worse as the year fails. It's an interesting way to describe a year. Obviously, he doesn't mean the year is like failing as in like there's an error and it's wrong, but I think he just means fails as in it's coming to an end. Once again, it's just a different way to use words that we just don't commonly use. I love this little line here when Frodo finds out he's going to Rivendell. He spoke lightly, but his heart was moved suddenly with a desire to see the house of Elrond half elven and breathe the air of that deep valley where many of the fair folk still dwelt in peace. Yes, 100%. Bilbo would have described it in a very romantic fashion, I'm sure. I do find it really sad that Bag End was sold to the Sackville Bagginses, no less. At a bargain price. Definitely that is not made clear in the movies. Like you get the impression in the movies that he just leaves Bag End exactly as is and would return to it just like Bilbo did. But no, it's gone. And like Frodo has spent the past year truly coming to terms with the fact that he is not returning, either because he's dying or because he will live elsewhere. I mean, he's taking it remarkably well. Like selling his house. Imagine if you were just told you had to go on a journey and you're probably not going to come back, and then spending the next year just sort of living in your house being like, well, I've got to sell this house. Like, it would be pretty intense. But it looks like a lot of this is also pretense because he's thinking about, because he doesn't want people to know he's left the Shire. So in order to do that, he has to pretend as if, yeah, he's selling Bag End not to leave the Shire, but to go back to Buckland. And he even buys a house there and moves all the Viz furniture there. And Merry and Pippin are in on like helping him do that. But Frodo's the only one who knows that this is all just fake. But at least now he's out of the way, so people aren't going to come looking for him and won't notice his absence, because they're just not going to notice his absence in Buckland like they would if he was still in Bag End. Or what's it called? Where is Bag End? It's on is it Overhill? I love that hobbits just like go to pubs and just gossip about the small comings and goings of each other, and that is like, that's their life, period. We have described the life of hobbits. And they enjoy it, and well, they also eat a lot and drink a lot. So Gandalf is like restless and ends up leaving Frodo again. He says here, I'm going down beyond the southern borders to get some news if I can. I'm going down beyond the southern borders. The southern, southern borders of the Shire? The southern borders of what? I don't know. That's confusing to me. I have been idle longer than I should. Yes, Gandalf. I'm just like, so Gandalf was here for apparently 2 months just chilling out in the Shire. Just, what was he doing? Like on a day-to-day basis, what was he doing? He'd get up in the morning, probably staying in some place where he couldn't stand up straight because he's in the Shire. Unless there is like a few inns that are built tall enough for, as the hobbits call them, big people. Was he just watching hobbits and just enjoying life? Maybe he was just so shocked at the ring being in Frodo's position and having that confirmed that he was just sort of waiting for a little bit to see if anything imminently happened to Frodo, or if Sauron was going to make a move. I mean, maybe Gandalf truly didn't know like the exact powers, and I don't think he does, of what Sauron could do or influence in the ring bearer. And so maybe he was just, because, you know, the shadows are creeping taller, maybe he was just like, I'll just wait out and see and make sure that everything's stable with Frodo and that he's not suddenly going mad and murdering people like Smeagol did. I don't know. But Gandalf does say, let me impress on you once more, don't use it. Makes you want to use it though, doesn't it? Don't press the red button. You know what I really love? And I think I said this last time. Merry and Pippin The way that they are introduced narratively in this book compared to the movies is so much better. I'm so much more empathetic and I like them more. In the movies, they really do come across as scallywags and just troublemakers who, you know, they're funny and they're good to be around, but like probably can't 100% be trusted or aren't like the closest friends to Frodo. But here, like even Merry saying this about Frodo's new home in Buckland that I assume he's never going to see. Someone must get there and warm the house before you arrive. And that's just such, it just like, captures hobbits in like one sentence, because hobbits are such homely creatures and everyone knows that feeling. You know, when you've moved house and the first night that you stay in the new house or a new place, it feels so foreign and empty and you're alone and there's new sounds and you're like, what is that sound? And it's everything. You get up in the middle of the night and you have to put the light on because you don't know how to walk to the bathroom because you don't know that, you know how you just get so used to your house in the dark that you don't really need to like have lights on because you know how many steps it is to get everywhere. But you don't, everything's so foreign in a new house. I don't know why I'm using that random example, but there's always, it's so lovely when you are moving house to have someone help you do it, to be there on that first night. I mean, I'm talking from my own experience because I've moved house many times as a student from different rentals to rentals to rentals. And it's always that first night where you're either alone or you're with housemates and it's just like, everything's just not, it's not home yet. Merry probably definitely wanted to just chill out in the house, but he genuinely was like, you know, we want to make this homey for Frodo. So yeah, definitely liking Merry and Pippin a lot. Well, Merry in that anyway. And then we get the opposite side where we get Frodo leaving Bag End, or being in Bag End for the last time. Bag End seemed sad and gloomy and dishevelled. Frodo wandered round the familiar rooms and saw the light of sunset fade on the walls and shadows creep out of the corners. It grew slowly dark indoors. Once again, it's that saying goodbye to an old, loved home and just walking around and everything just feels off because everything's packed up and you kind of stuck in the idea of like all of the memories that you have around in between these walls and how you are never ever going to have that back again. Like that is, you are closing the book. That chapter is finished. So they set out. It's Sam and Frodo and Pippin. And Sam is carrying all of the heavy stuff. And Pippin is just like, no, Sam, don't let Frodo give you more stuff to carry. He'll feel the weight less when he's walked off some of his own. So great. So great. There's a great line here after they settle down. So it looks like what they do is they don't walk along the main road, the east road. They walk south of that toward the Green Hill country with the aim to go through the woods and the path there, which is called Tuckborough Path, to get to Woodhall or Woodle and eventually across to Brandy Hall. Or the Buckleberry Ferry, because it looks like there's two ways to cross the Brandywine River, which is also known as the Barrendoin River. I assume the hobbits just call it the Brandywine River in the little bit that goes through the Shire, because why not call a river after two different kinds of alcohol? Yeah. But yeah, there's two ways to cross it in the Shire. It's either the Brandywine Bridge or Buckleberry Ferry. Or you could swim. So it looks like they're going to get the ferry. But yeah, I love this line. After they rest, the night was clear, cool and starry, but smoke-like wisps of mist were creeping up the hillsides from the streams and deep meadows. Thin-clad birches swaying in a light wind above their heads made for a black net against the pale sky. So Pippin basically gives Frodo a hard time for trying to make Sam do more work, but then says to Sam the next morning, Sam, get breakfast ready for 9:30. Have you got the bath water hot? I actually genuinely cannot tell how much of this is sarcasm and how much isn't, because they can't have baths, so obviously there's no bath water. But the first part of that statement of getting breakfast ready, I don't think was sarcasm, because Sam goes about and gets breakfast ready for them. So it is kind of like a little hard to read, I think, the Sam stuff, with how much he sees himself as lesser and more of in a servant role compared to not just Frodo, but now also Pippin, because of his just accident of being born to a different family than what Frodo was. And I never liked that kind of stuff, but whatever. Sam stood by him. His round eyes were wide open, for he was looking across lands he had never seen to a new horizon. Interesting. I mean, for us, we're just so overexposed to different horizons from photos from all over the world that seeing new horizons doesn't seem fantastical in any way. But I'm sure it would be if we, spent our entire lives in one tiny town with no access to the internet. I also agree that this is a crazy fact. Do you realize that this is the very path that goes through Mirkwood, and that if you let it, it might take you to the Lonely Mountain or even further and to worse places? This is Frodo talking about the road. I'm assuming the East Road. It is wild. It is wild that there is one road that just goes straight through the Shire, but also that is the same road that cuts through all these other places. I'm sure there's a history to this road. It is a little bit interesting that Frodo is getting both, and I don't know if it makes sense to me, like Frodo is getting both the desire to hide from the Black Riders when they come across them, but then also the desire to put his ring on. That they are opposite things. Technically, shouldn't the ring be causing him to have a desire to not hide and put the ring on? I guess what we're really seeing here is that there is an instinctual desire to hide from evil things and flee before evil if you are a good person. And he's feeling that, but then he's also feeling Sauron's presence or influence. And the Black Rider smells the air. I do wonder what they are smelling for. Like, the ring can't be carrying any scent unless Sauron's presence wafts from it in ways that only a Black Rider could find. Sauron trained them all like dogs. This is how I smell. So just, stop and smell the air every now and then. You might find the ring. What do you do when you give tracking dogs like a piece of cloth of the person you're trying to track that has their scent on it? Pippin says, what has one of the big people got to do with this? Because they just assume this Black Rider is some random human or big person. There are some men about down in the South Farthing. They have had trouble with big people, I believe. But I've never heard of anything like this rider. Interesting. This is the first time I'm hearing about this ever. What problem was happening down in South Farthing? Because the first part of the D&D campaign that I'm running is problems with men south of South Farthing, coming up from Tharbid, I think is the township there, and basically doing like raids around that area to collect, useful things, but also like taking slaves back with them. I love the idea that they take a break in like the bulk of a tree, like they've crawled in the gap of the base of a tree and like cooked dinner there. It's just, that's so cute. It's like all those dreams you have as a kid of like meeting fairies and wild animals in like the cracks of trees and like wanting to live in like this big amazing tree house. It's very cool. It was still alive and had leaves on the small branches that it had put out round the broken stumps of its long fallen limbs, but it was hollow and could be entered by a great crack on the side away from the road. The hobbits crept inside and sat, there upon a floor of old leaves and decayed wood, and they had a light meal, quietly talking and listening from time to time. It's so beautiful. I love that. And also how they hum as they walk along, as hobbits have a way of doing as they walk along, especially when they are drawing near to home at night. That's just a cute little thing. I don't know why I found this funny, but Frodo's like, I don't want to be seen if there's another Black Rider. And Pippin's like, very well, but don't forget the sniffing. The second time they come across the Black Rider, they had no time to find any hiding place better than the general darkness under the trees. I love it how Tolkien just describes darkness as general darkness. It's like, it's generally dark. We'll just hide in the general part of the darkness. There's no greater place to hide from shadow than in general darkness, right? Okay, then we get to the elves, which is the very last part of this chapter. And I was initially very confused because it seemed like they were living there because they had this place where they were like, had like a fire and this like, anyway, I don't know, we'll get there in a second. But no, they're just passing through. Frodo says that these are high elves because they spoke the name of Elbereth, and Elbereth is a word for Vada. God, that took me a while to remember. Just trying to see from the Silmarillion. Elbereth. I'm sure that Elbereth is mentioned in here. With Manwë dwelt Vada the most beautiful, she who in the Sindarin tongue is named Elbereth, queen of the Valar, maker of the stars, and with them were a great host of spirits in blessedness. So in Sindarin it's Elbereth, which is interesting because, I'll just double check that that's the same here. Of all the great ones who dwell in this world, the elves hold Vada most in reverence and love. Elbereth they name her, and they call upon her name out of the shadows of Middle-earth and uplift it in song at the rising of the stars. Which is exactly how Frodo comes across, Frodo, Pippin and Sam come across the elves, is that they, as it is becoming night and the stars are getting lifted into the sky, they are singing of Elbereth. They also call her Gilfoniel. So it says that's Sindarin, but then, sorry, I got super caught out on this because I got really confused when Frodo used the word high elves, because I initially thought, what do you mean? What's a high elf compared to a non-high elf? And specifically high elves, I believe, are elves belonging to one of the three tribes, or the three groups that left Cuiviénen. So that's going to be the Teleri, the Noldor, and the Vanya. And then everyone who kind of stayed behind, which actually was quite a few Teleri, would then be not considered high elves. Which means that if Elbereth is Sindarin, technically Sindarin also is not necessarily the language of the high elves, because that could also be a language of non-high elves. Anyway, it caught me out. And at the end of the day, I don't think we can get a proper answer, because even if we have a look at the etymology of Elbereth in the Lost Road book, basically, so El is actually Quenya, and Elbereth is considered Noldoran. So yeah, it's interesting. So in this etymology here, it's considered Noldoran, but then in the Silmarillion, it says it's a Sindarin name for Vada. I'm definitely thinking about this too much. How do you know that someone is a high elf if they use the word Elbereth when we don't have a clear etymology of Elbereth? And also, what exactly is a high elf when we know that the Teleri split into different groups and only some of them ended up going across and others stayed behind? So who counts as a high elf? The Feanorians would have a lot to say about this. So we meet Gildor, who is just kind of rude. All the elves are just like, kind of, it feels rude because they're just like, 3 hobbits in a wood at night? We've not seen such a thing since Bilbo. What is the meaning of this? And Frodo's like, I'm so glad you're here. And they're like, well, we have no need of other company, and hobbits are kind of dull. Well, they say, and hobbits are so dull, they laugh. And how do you even know that we're going the same way as you if you don't know whither we are going? And because I assume the elves are actually going west whilst Frodo is going east. How do you know my name? We know many things. So it doesn't give an answer, just says a vague answer. It's just really fun. It's just so random that they know his name straight off the bat. Like, these elves just like walking, doing their thing, and they're like, oh, there's a hobbit. Oh, that's Frodo Baggins. Never seen him before, but that's definitely Frodo. And they're like, hail Frodo, you're out late. It's just like, it just feels like they come up to Frodo and just slap little insults into him the entire time. But none of the hobbits seem to care in any way because they're just so dazzled by the elves. You can get away with anything. Very interesting. I love, so Gildor says, I'm Gildor Inglorian, and I just, of the house of Finrod. Very cool that the House of Finrod is going strong in Middle-earth in the Third Age, despite the fact that I'm pretty certain Finrod wouldn't even be there. So they've certainly taken their time to go back to the leader of their house. It's been thousands of years. And they say, we are exiles and most of our kindred have long ago departed, and we too are tarrying here a while. Tarry. Do you mean dallying? Tarry does mean to stay longer than intended. Yeah, I mean, you don't say. You introduce yourself as from the House of Finrod that technically doesn't exist there unless they count that as the House of Galadriel, but I'm pretty sure they wouldn't because Galadriel kind of wanted her own thing. His name is King Gildor Inglorian. Now, Inglor I know because I was just recently reading The War of the Jewels. Inglor is the name of Finrod in the section that I'm reading, and then Finrod's is the name of Finarfin. And then so Tolkien switches it around. It's interesting though that he ends up using the word Inglor once he gives Finrod his own name, or Finrod. He then uses Inglor for Gildor, who happens to also be in the House of Finrod, so he clearly wanted Inglor to be a name of someone. But anyway, his name is Gildor Inglorian. I mean, I'm assuming his last name isn't Inglorian because it doesn't really seem like elves give themselves last names like hobbits do, for example. So when he says Inglorian, that must mean son of Inglor. Unless this is Finrod's son and no one's just... No, because of the House of Finrod. It's just so funny that they think they've been tarrying here for a while. I'm pretty sure even elves would consider 4,000 to 5,000 years as more than a while. Unless they're just like so over everything. They're just like, we'll just call every period of time that ever exists a while. And then the apparent rudeness gets worse. Well, Pippin interrupts and he's like, oh, wise people, tell us about the Black Riders. And the elves kind of spoke together softly in their own tongue before Gildor says, well, we're not going to talk about that. And it's not our custom, but for this time we'll take you on the road and you'll lodge with us tonight, if you will. And when Frodo talks back using some elven words, Gildor like laughs and he's like, be careful, friends, speak no secrets. Here is a scholar in the ancient tongue. So basically Gildor is like, guys, don't talk bad about them. They can understand our language. Stop calling Sam the fat one. Was it Gollum who did that in the movie? I think so. Like, I can't help but think that Gildor's just like being like, guys, stop talking about them. Or like also kind of mocking them like, oh, be careful. He's so smart. He speaks our language. I don't know why I'm getting the vibe of this from Gildor. I think it's hilarious and I love it, but it's just unexpectedly like borderline mocking and rude and kind of brutal, but like at the same time, they must be looking so polite as they say these like borderline, are they mocking us kind of words? Yeah, and so I got confused here because the elves take them back to this little place. At the south end of the greensward, there was an opening. I don't know where greensward is. There on the green floor ran on into the wood and formed a wide space like a hall, roofed by the boughs of trees. Their great trunks ran like pillars down each side, and in the middle there was a wood fire blazing. Upon the tree pillars, torches with lights of gold and silver were burning steadily, and the elves sat round a fire upon the grass or upon the sawn rings of old trunks. Beautiful picture, but it also just feels like there's this hall made out of like a natural wood, and they're just like drinking and being merry in this place. It feels like the elves have been here for ages, and maybe they have been. Maybe they've been here for weeks and weeks or months even, and they just happen to decide that day that they'll be leaving the next morning. Or maybe this wood was already here and it was one of the hobbits. It's part of, I don't know, whatever this wood was, this greensward, which by the way is not on the map. Is it? No, it's not. Like, did the elves just like form this little natural place where they were chilling out for a bit, or what? I don't know. The elves all burst into song. Suddenly under the trees a fire sprang up with a red light. Did the elves create this fire magically? Is this like a specific magical fire? Anyway, I love that. That was beautiful. The elves are also just like, by the way, we are actually way more posh than this. We would give you would be way better hosts if we were in our amazing halls back in wherever they've come from. I assume Lothlorien. This is poor fare, they said to the hobbits, for we are lodging in the greenwood, far from our halls. If you are ever our guests at home, we will treat you better. Like, yeah, that's literally them just saying we're way richer. So, like, if you're not impressed by this, don't worry. We'd impress you. Okay. But the hobbits don't seem to mind because they're all just, like, obsessed. I love how Sam is like, of all the things, it's the singing that went to my heart, if you know what I mean. Oh, yes, I know what you mean, Sam. And once again, because the elves have already made fun of like a hobbit just being like, you know, speaking their language, and now they're like, here is a jewel among hobbits. So they're basically, I've always loved sentences that insult and compliment at the same time. So like basically to say that Frodo is a jewel among hobbits is to say that, yeah, you're very cool, but also you're a hobbit. And none of them are cool or interesting, especially from the context of them saying just before, and hobbits are so dull. Like, this is the first impression that we get of elves, and they just insult an entire race. Gimli was right. It's really cute how Pippin falls asleep, and it says here, and was lifted up and borne away to a bower under the trees. There he was laid under a soft bed and slept the rest of the night away. It's like he fell asleep and the elves were just like, oh, we know this really cute place where he could sleep, and like lift him up and carry him there. I can just imagine them lifting him up so carefully that he wouldn't notice. It would feel like he's floating on a cloud. Gildor then spoke to Frodo, talked about sad and ominous tidings of gathering darkness, the wars of men, and the flight of the elves. Not a great combination right now. We truly cannot imagine what it would be like to be that old and to be immortal, because it seems wild that the most powerful beings on Arda are fleeing as danger rises. Shouldn't they be staying there now more than ever? But I think that sort of question is answered by something Gildor says later on, which is, I do not give this counsel gladly. I fear I say too much, because Frodo's asking for advice and Gildor is very reluctant to give it. And I think at the end of the day, all elves are scarred from the fact that in the past they were very proactive and they made lots of decisions, and it was just, they didn't have a good time. They did not have a good time when they were trying to shape their own world. It ended badly. It created much sorrow. And so they're like, you know, if we do nothing, we're actually better off, which is a terrible way to exist. Imagine if you're like, well, if you're proactive, you'll probably create lots of evil and it will be awful for you. And if you do nothing, you'll probably be happier for it, but also you're doing nothing for the rest of your life. It's such a terrible choice. But that's kind of the vibe I got. It's just like, well, they're fleeing at the time of need, but they're also just like, I think, permanently scarred internally from a time where they did step in and try to do stuff and it just did not end well. If this guy, Gildor, is from the House of Finrod, I'm assuming that he was with Finrod, crossed the Helcaraxe, lived in Nargothrond, saw its fall, probably died. Maybe he's died and rebirthed. Maybe he's been alive the whole time. I don't know. But he's seen stuff, you know. Frodo's just like, okay, but what are the Black Riders? And Gildor's like, seriously, has Gandalf told you nothing? But then he doesn't answer. It's like, Gildor is like, what Gandalf has sent them on this adventure and not told them anything, but then proceeds to like give no more answers than what Gandalf did. Once again, I think because he's scared to tell too much that might influence someone one way or another, so he'd rather just take a hands-off approach, which is a decision in and of itself, by the way. Doing nothing is an action. And then Gildor reminds Frodo that the Shire is not immune to the evils of the outside world. Others dwelt here before hobbits were, and others will dwell here again when hobbits are no more. Jesus Christ, what? Firstly, who dwelt there before hobbits were there? Mainly men and elves, yep. And he's also just saying that hobbits will be no more. Like, the entire race of hobbits will be gone, which makes sense because if this is our world and our history, then obviously there are no hobbits right now. But that is insane that he's just like, you know, don't get attached to it. Like, hobbits are going to go extinct probably by the next age. Frodo then tells Gildor that Gandalf was expected to be back in the Shire, but hasn't come back. And there's this moment where Gildor was silent for a moment. I do not like this news, he said at last. It's never a good sign when someone who understands what Gandalf is and has been around for a really long time goes silent for a moment and then tells you that this is bad news. Like, that's not something you ever want to hear from a person like that. Yeah, so Gildor says, elves seldom give unguarded advice, for advice is a dangerous gift, even from the wise to the wise, and all courses may run ill. Spoken from a place of deep trauma, bro. But he does give some advice, and that is to just go really quickly, and also, we're going to leave as well, because we don't want to be part of this. And also take friends that you trust. But then just reminds Frodo that the elves have their own labours and their own sorrows, and they are little concerned with the ways of hobbits or of any creatures upon earth. Boom, goodbye. Just a reminder that we don't really care that much. No, I don't think that's it. I think it's just we truly could not possibly understand what it would be like to be immortal. Because time and the rise and fall of good and evil would be just another time in your life. It would just be a phase. It would just, no matter what happens, you will exist at the end of it. You know, obviously you don't want to be one of those people who's been necromanced by Sauron and fades in an evil way, but like most elves, you don't want to be caught and become an orc. But because I've also been reading this book by David White, and one of the latest chapters I just read was called Nostalgia, and it made me think of the elves. Nostalgia is not an immersion in the past. Nostalgia is the first annunciation that the past as we know it is coming to an end. I think this is a great quote for this chapter because, you know, we've got Frodo leaving his house, knowing that is the end for him, but also like, to go back to the elves, like for them, nostalgia is just everything that they are doing is just constantly watching the ends of things that have begun. They have so many memories in that they will never be able to revisit now, except in their minds. They just must be so trapped in their minds. Gildor's like, okay, go to sleep now, and Frodo's like, I will sleep now. And then Gildor leads Frodo to like a comfy place to sleep, and Frodo falls asleep. I don't know why I find that creepy, but I do. Okay. Because I think it's because he says, Gildor says at the very end of the chapter, I name you elf friend. Gee, thanks. I'm so proud. Don't know why. I just find all of this just like borderline mocking from Gildor's part. You should feel so grateful I name you elf friend. But yeah, Gildor says, sleep now. And then directly after that, pretty much, it says, Frodo felt sleep coming upon him, even as Gildor finished speaking, as if Gildor lulled him into a sleep. That's just kind of creepy. The last thing that I wanted to note is that we do get, I love it how Gildor says, may Elbereth protect you. There's so many exclamation marks used in this speech. I'm not used to it because I'm used to modern books where exclamation marks are much fewer. Frodo at least says, but I wish you would tell me plainly what the Black Riders are. Like, if I take your advice and I don't see Gandalf, like, I pretty much should know what danger is pursuing me. And Gildor's like, is it not enough to know that they are servants of the enemy? Flee them. Which is a fair call, but also like, you could just say one sentence like, they were once, like all you have to say is that they're looking for the ring because they are servants of previous magic rings that went wrong. Like, I like it how Gildor says that he's going to spread the word of elves who are still like chilling out and not leaving. He's going to spread the word that, you know, Frodo might need like some kind of protection. I really like that. So that is a proactive thing to do. Like, so I'm being harsh. Gildor technically gave a lot of information to Frodo that he didn't previously had. Could have done a lot more, but then also, you know, warns them, says take company, and also says we'll spread the word so that other people will look out for you, which is really lovely. How nice would that be to be going on a journey and just being like, I name you elf friend, also I'll spread the word that you're an elf friend, and all of these cool other elves will just like watch over you. Creepy, but cool. The next chapter is called A Shortcut to Mushrooms. What? No one told me that the chapter titles were going to be so gorgeous. I love it. Anyway, I really loved this chapter because obviously don't have this interaction in the Lord of the Rings movie, which the Lord of the Rings movies get darker much more quickly. And this whole Gildor thing, like, he can't be much of a big character because I've never heard of this person from anywhere in the Silmarillion, nor have I heard of him from the movies. Anyway, I will see you for the next chapter.